broke into my house on July 10th, 1998, and came in with a shotgun. And he proceeded to kill all three of my kids, and then he killed himself.
From just hearing that snippet of your story, it would feel like, oh, this is just going to be so heavy and challenging. And I can tell you that chapter where you described what happened on that day was just devastating. But you wrote it in such a way that you loved and supported all of us through the journey. And it's just remarkable. It's just remarkable. How did you go on? And what is the response to that? Like, what
The
choice?
response is I didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
Basically, I did have a choice. I knew early on that my choice was to um, move forward, find happiness, forgive, and find healing, even if I just did it for my kids, because my kids would not have wanted me to just wither away, and that's the other choice. And I kind of knew that.
Welcome to the Light the Day podcast, where we explore spiritually transformative experiences. I'm your host, Julie Clough, and I'm just thrilled to be here with you today. And I, as always, ask you to subscribe, like, share, do all the things that help us spread more light in this world. And today I have a beautiful light with me, Theresa James. Hi, Theresa.
Hi, Julie. Thank you for having me.
I am so thrilled to have you here today. Um, yeah, it's a challenging story, but it's a beautiful story of healing. And so before I like give too much away, just share a little bit about yourself and then we'll go back into your story.
Okay. I'm Theresa James, and I live in Indiana. I am the mother of five. I am married to a wonderful husband, Todd. We've been married for about almost 27 years. On my real life job, I am a financial advisor and supervisory authority in our branch. Been doing that for over 20 years. Currently on a spiritual journey for myself, and I'm an author. I've written one memoir called Healing Tears, and I've written five children's books, one for each of my children. And yeah, that's who I am. And I met you through Living God's Light,
Yes.
um, the book with Vinnie Tolman, Light After Death. And through that channel, I met you, which has been a wonderful experience. And that's basically who I am.
Yeah, yeah. Vinny connected us, didn't he?
You did. You did.
Yeah, wonderful. I love living God's light, and as always, I love to highlight beautiful organizations doing good things, and so just encourage anybody to look up livinggodslight.org and get connected with this that community. But Theresa, let's talk about your story, like your life-changing experience. So let's go back in time, and just, start wherever you feel comfortable.
Okay. I am a Air Force veteran. I went in right out of high school, and when I was in, I was young and naive, and ended up pregnant, ended up married, ended up having a son named Sean, and divorced, sadly, and got out of the military after my term. And I was at an age where I really wanted to settle down. I wanted to have more children. And I found a man who I found who he would be a good provider. He, I thought, would be a good father. So we got married and we had two children together. We had Jared and then Brandy. And our marriage broke down. It just had no communication. He traveled constantly towards the end of our marriage, and it just was not working. And so I filed for divorce, and he spiraled into a negative place. And I could not get him to see that his future could be happy, but it just wasn't going to be with me.
Yeah.
And He broke into my house on July 10th, 1998. He broke into my house and came in with a shotgun, and he proceeded to kill all three of my kids, and then he killed himself. And after he killed my daughter, sadly, it was in front of me. We struggled with the gun. He threw me in my bedroom. But I saw him kill my daughter, and as I stood there, he went into my son's room, and then he killed him, and I ran out of the house. I knew if I stayed, I was going to die too. So I left, and then I found out later through the police and everything that he did kill all three and then kill himself. And so um, then I started my path of healing. And so that's where my book, Healing Tears, came from. And so that began my journey.
Yeah, and I highly recommend your book.
Thank you.
It's so beautifully written. It's so impactful. It like literally, I feel like it changed my life reading your book. Um, and it sounds like from just hearing that snippet of your story, it would feel like, oh, this is it's just going to be so heavy and challenging. And I can tell you that chapter where you described what happened on that day was really just devastating. But you wrote it in such a way that you loved and supported all of us through the journey. And and it's just remarkable. It's just remarkable. And we were talking before we hit record, and I said, some people will say, like, how did you go on? And what is the response to that? Like, what
The
choice?
response is I didn't have a choice.
Yeah.
Basically, I did have a choice. And I knew early on that my choice was to move forward, find happiness, forgive, and find healing, even if I just did it for my kids, because my kids would not have wanted me to just wither away, and that's the other choice. And I kind of knew that it would have been very easy. I was at an age where I could go back in the military, and I dreamt about it for 2 years, going back in the military, because I could disappear. I could be whoever I wanted. I would never have to share anything. But I also knew that would be a life of some addiction, and drinking. And that's the other choice. I could have gone a path of, destroying myself with addictions, and I didn't want to do that, and I knew my kids would be so disappointed in me. So I chose very quickly to forgive, and I knew forgiving John was my path forward, because forgiving was the gift I gave myself, because I knew if I carried all that anger and hatred, because it was there in the beginning,
Of
it was there,
course. Yeah.
and but I knew if I forgave him, I could let that go and move forward, because I looked at him as another person who was in horrific pain. I didn't condone what he did, because back in the day, I used to say, because remember, this was 1998.
Yeah.
And back then, I would say, why couldn't he just kill himself? Why did he have to do this to the kids? Why did he have to do that? Why did he, why in front of me? Why? But I knew he did it because he was in pain and wanted to create pain for me.
Hmm.
Yeah. So that's the answer to that question. How did I do that? In my brain, I had no choice.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's no simple answers
No.
to what happened or why, and that's where our brain wants to go. And there's a significant, my background is in grief and grief healing, and there's a significant amount of energy that we put in that direction early on. in trying to figure it out. Like our brain wants some answers, wants to figure it out. And we do have to explore some of those answers, and we do have to experience the anger
Hmm.
and the, like this is a strong word, but I imagine like there's just like hate, like just because we hate the act, we hate the
Right.
experience of what happened and the, all the whys and all that. Um, if you can kind of share
Hmm.
with us a little bit about some of those like turning points for
Okay.
you, like what those look like or felt like.
When I was going through the divorce, my attorney, because John was breaking down mentally, he was making threats to me. He was leaving horrible voicemails to me. I mean, at one point we had an altercation and with a golf club, and it broke, and he split my hand open. When after he had dropped the kids off. But she told me, write everything down every day, write everything down that he's doing, basically as evidence through the divorce as to, what he was doing. Um, but I've always been a writer. I've always written my emotions. I've always found healing and purpose in doing that. So it was easy for me. And then after that morning, I wrote everything every day. I wrote the good, the bad, and the ugly. I wrote the anger, the hatred, the forgiveness, everything I had to deal with, all the decisions I had to make. I wrote everything. Um, and so I literally wrote for a year. I journaled everything, which was very healing through that whole process. I shed lots of tears and wrote that every day. And so that was a year. And then I spent another year actually writing my book. And writing it forced me to go back and relive every emotion, every detail of that prior year. Um, and in doing that, there was more healing because I forced myself to to relive every emotion. And it was horribly painful to write and relive all of that. But I knew reliving each emotion was a release. So I could continue my growth pattern and continue my healing to find joy. And part of that joy was finding my husband.
Mm.
And so Todd and I married, and he has two children, which are my kids too. And so when I said I had five, that's why I have five. But that was part of the joy and finding purpose, because it was very important for me then to find purpose. And so my purpose was Todd and his kids and helping raise his kids. So
Yeah.
those are some of the initial um, healing steps. I was introduced to an incredible woman who was my therapist during that whole time, Margaret, and she was just a godsend to me. She taught me how to use meditation, which was a beautiful experience. One of the first times she did it with me, I saw my kids. I may get emotional
That's okay.
because I listened to it. I found it in a box literally less than a couple of weeks ago, and I listened to it again. But she walked me through this beautiful meditation through this field and a stream and down to the water. And my kids were there playing and talking to me.
Mm,
And that was beautiful healing back then, too,
yeah. Yeah,
because it
you're
was
healing.
important to feel them.
Mm,
I'd lost them, and I just wanted to feel them with me. So that was a beautiful experience then too.
I can only imagine. I've found in my own experience and the experience of, working with others that there's a beautiful spiritual component to healing. And when we can make that connection, that spirit connection, it makes all the difference.
Absolutely. I agree.
Yeah. And the journaling you did, that is so healing. I I did not do that. In my own experience, I'll just say that out loud. Like, I had this wonderful therapist that I was working with, and she kept encouraging me to journal. And I found my journal recently from that time. And I had filled, in 3 years, I had filled maybe 5 pages with just assignments where I needed to list certain things. But that was the only thing that I wrote down during that time. And it wasn't until after I experienced some healing that I started writing, and was so, that just brought me to another level of healing. So I really appreciate, like, that seems to be a theme as I talk to people in their own spiritual awakening and their own spiritual experiences, is journaling comes up frequently. It
It's
really does.
amazing how much you can let go of stuff. And you have to trust, you don't have to share that with anybody. You
Hmm.
can write it all down. And if you want to go burn it. But
Yeah.
have a healing part of yourself go, okay, I'm going to release all this and I'm just going to burn it and get rid of it. Or like me, I wrote the book. I tried back then, you didn't self-publish books.
Yeah.
So I tried a couple of times with some publishers. They rejected my book, and I was not mentally prepared for a rejection of any kind. So I put
Mm.
it away. And my book, when I wrote it, it wasn't on a laptop, it was on pages in a book.
Wow. Wow.
Internet wasn't back there. It wasn't in existence or not on a normal level. So I just kind of put it away. Looking back now, it was God protecting me that you're not ready to talk about this. You are not ready to have positive or negative talk about your story. And then it was hurtful. Now I see it, or whenever I published my book, which was in 2017. So it went from year 2000 when I finished it to 17 years later before I published it. And then I knew there were some signs, but then I knew it was time to publish it. I was ready to talk about it. I was ready to share my story because I had shared it along those 17 years with very few people, but I received great response on how much it helped them through their trauma and grief to find hope and inspiration and to know that you're stronger than you think, to be able to handle anything and move forward. Um, so that was why I decided to go ahead and publish the book when I did. And I
Yeah.
always say publishing and writing Healing Tears was my therapy, and writing and publishing my 5 children's books was my joy.
Mm, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but along the way, I remember in reading your book, you had experiences, you had opportunities to
Mhm.
meet people and to write some articles, and share in that way. Can you share a little bit about what
Okay.
happened there?
Yes.
Yeah.
God was very good to me by putting the right people in my life at the right time. And after it happened, I don't remember, 8 months, 6 months, whatever, maybe a year. The Oprah Winfrey Show reached out to the local police department in Jasper, Indiana, where this all took place, and gave information. The police all knew me very well, knew where I was living, but totally authenticated who was calling before they gave the message to me. But they wanted me to come on the show. And back then, Gary Zukav, who wrote a book called Seed of the Soul, was something that my therapist had Todd and I read together. And we read it out loud. We would stop, we would talk about what that meant. And it was a beautiful, beautiful book. And so then Oprah wanted me to come on with Gary on doing a focus on his chapter called Responsible Choice. And it was a focus on me making a responsible choice to forgive so I could move forward. So
Mm.
that was one. And then Gary after the show, Gary asked me, and again, this is before the internet, so he did a physical newsletter and he asked me to write the center story in his newsletter. So I spent some time and with some of his editing and everything. It was a beautiful journey, you know, with pictures of my kids and everything. And then back then, James Van Praagh, who is a medium, he had a show called Beyond. And I don't remember how he found me, but I ended up being a guest on the Beyond show. And he connected with so many people that he connected with my kids and shared stories to me. And again, more healing, but it was a beautiful thing back then because all of that happened in 99 and 2000. So
Really early on in your
yes.
journey. Yeah. I'm curious what your feelings were about mediumship before that happens. Like, were you open to that or
Oh, absolutely. Always have been my whole life. Um, I've always tried to stay in tune and I just kind of know things sometimes. And then I've had some messages and so I don't question it. I try to embrace it. And I'm on a journey now of embracing it even more. You and I have had quite the extensive conversation about it, but yeah, my mom exposed me to that when I was young with some other friends. And then through my life, there's just been lots of people and tell me stories. And you just can't deny that that you're protected by your guides and they help you and give you messages if you just quiet enough to listen.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I was open completely to go and talk with James.
That's awesome. What were some of the messages or what was that experience like with James? I'm familiar with him and his work, but I'm just curious, like what came out in that experience with James Van Praagh?
So the main things I remember is him describing different things that were in my house that
Mhm.
connected to the kids. So like one is he described the rocking chair I used to rock the kids in, and he described Jared sitting in it and me reading to him, and he cut his baby teeth on that rocking chair, which I still have, and I've never refinished it. But you see little marks in the wood, and nobody would know that. So
Yeah.
he shared that, and then I had a little angel nightlight that sat in Brandy's bedroom, and that was her light in the at night, so she wouldn't be scared. And I never really I plugged it in my bedroom after I lost the kids. I kept it, but I never. It had one of those rotating switches, and I never rotated it on. It stayed plugged in, but I never turned it on ever. And I was in the bedroom one day, and just thinking about the kids, and that light came on. And
Wow.
I just looked at it and I just said, "Hi, Brandy. I
Mm,
love you. I thank you for that." And James told me that whole story.
wow.
Yeah. So it
Wow.
was validation too, um, that they are with me, whether I hear them or not. It's just knowing that they're there. And so that was just a couple of the big takeaways for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and how wonderful that you had that experience with Brandy, that you were open to it, that you in that moment said, "Hi, Brandy, thank you for that." And then to have James validate it for you even further,
Yes.
it's remarkable, really is remarkable.
The other thing I'm just now remember, James really talked about he could see my guides and described a couple of them. And he said, they are your protectors. They are here during your healing. They are doing everything they can to make sure you're healing. And so that was very comforting as well. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
mhm.
beautiful. Wow. Wow, what remarkable experiences. And Gary Zukav's book, Seat of the Soul. I've heard Oprah talk about that book, and she's like, it's worn out. She's like, my copy is like sitting on the bedside stand and worn out and marked, and how remarkable that you had a therapist that recommended that book
Mm.
to you. What did
And
that mean
like
to
I
you?
said, it all fell into place. I don't think I would have ever went on Oprah just to talk about that, but because she said it was about Gary, I was like, I'm in. I'm in. I want to, I want to meet this man too. And it was just an incredible experience. But yeah, everything happens for a reason, and all of that just when I wrote everything, it was amazing watching how everything transpired, you know, to put in my book, like, just like this, I met Vinny from Living God's Light before it was Living God's Light. I met him at a retreat. Then I read the book and I followed him, and then Living God's Light. And then it turns out, and then I met you. And it just, when you stay open, I think it's just incredible the experiences you can have and the connections that you make.
Love that so much. I know it's been a long time ago, but I'm just curious, do you remember any highlights of any ahas that you might have had when you were reading that book with your husband, Todd?
Um, I just briefly, like, I went back and reread my highlights because my book's all highlighted inside like a
Yeah.
year ago. But he talks a lot about an authentic person who's an authentic soul. And it's one that recognizes who they are on a higher level. And that when you do things negatively on this earth or whatever, that's your ego more than, your spirit, because your spirit cannot, your soul does not want to cause harm to another, you know, living being, kind of thing. And resonated. The whole chapter on responsible choice just helped me know I was on the right path. So those are the two big highlights, I don't even know if I remember a lot of the other stuff, but
I'm sure. Well, and it's funny because things like that, it's like it lands and we receive it and it just carries with us,
yes,
carries with us in a way that, over time, other things come in and and we're able to receive more because of what we've received before. And I think it's interesting that the authentic person that stands out to you because that's the first lesson that Vinny, or I guess that's the right word for it. I don't know. That Vinny highlights in his book, in his experience in heaven, his experience of being on the other side that was one of the first things that he was taught was about being authentic. And that had really stuck with me because I've I've struggled with that a little bit. What does it mean to be authentic? How do I know I'm being authentic? In what way am I being authentic? So I love that there's that connection too between, you know, um, the light after death and the seat of the soul and this idea of being authentic. And of course, it makes sense that our authentic self would be connected to our soul, which would not want to do any harm.
right.
Beautiful.
Well, and I can tell you, I think recently I've really started diving into being authentic. I did the 12-week facilitated workbook group with Living God's Light, and to kind of dive into each of the principles. And I was very quiet in the first several weeks because I didn't really want to share my story, because I trust myself to know when to share, when not to share.
Hmm.
And we got to the point of being authentic in the week, and I was like, okay, I'm not being fair, I'm not being authentic, I'm being quiet, I'm not quiet, I'm I'm very opinionated, I'm very vocal, and I was not any of that. So I reached out to some of the people in the group, and I shared my story. And so it changed the dynamic and the energy for me. The next 6, 8 weeks we were in the group, it was an amazing shift. And I have to own that. I have to be willing to share my story more, but sometimes I don't, because some people don't know how to respond back to me. And
Mm-hmm.
you and I've had this talk.
Yes, we have.
I have to be slower and kinder and gentler when I tell my story, because it's an old story to me, but it's new to someone new, and the first time I'm sharing it with them. And so I have to grant them the time to process that before I just continue on. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so that's part of being authentic for me is, the 17 years before I published my story, I played in a women's golf league for 6 years. Nobody knew anything like that about me. I didn't share anything. Um, and so I know I wasn't being an authentic person, on that level. I just didn't open up. And now I'm an open book, like
Mm-hmm.
to anybody and everybody you know, if they want to take away anything from me telling them the story, great. And if they want to shut down and don't know how to interact with me, I can't change that for them. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because um our stories don't define us. So, in other words, I remember, after my children passed, I remember feeling like at the time that I am only, I'm defined by this. Like it was like everybody knew me as the mom who lost two children, right? And I can only imagine how that would be the case in your experience, especially with it, I mean, in so many ways, like the circumstances, the publicity of it, just the whole thing, like it can be um some, we can when we go through really challenging things like that, it can be tempting to just go, okay, this is who I am, and define ourselves by an experience. But we are so much more than the story, right?
right.
We're so much more than the story. And what I hear you saying is that you've really connected at this higher level of like higher meaning, the soul plan, like whatever terminology we want to put around that, but it feels like your understanding is broader than what's just happening right here, right now on Earth.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I try to embrace any opportunity to expand that. And I don't want people to pity me. I don't, and I know that's why I didn't share for a long time,
Yeah.
because they didn't know what to say to me, and they would pity that I lost my kids, and oh, this poor mom, and I didn't want that. I wanted people to look at me and say, oh my gosh, she's stronger than I could have ever imagined. How did she do that? But look at her. She's found joy. She continues on her life and finds purpose, and embraces everything. And yeah, so I mean that's what I wanted, not the definition of this horrible story.
Yeah, for
So
sure. And you certainly have claimed that soul power in your story by reclaiming yourself and then sharing the story in a way that feels authentic and right for you. I'm wondering what, like, tell us a little bit about how that came about, where you felt ready, or you felt ready to share the actual book and what that process was
Well,
like.
that's a James Van Praagh story again.
Oh,
So
okay.
our paths crossed again because so it was in 2016 and I was living up north of Chicago. I had been up there about 10 years. And I was trying to connect to my spirit guides. I've always kind of wanted to focus in on them a little more. And I followed James on socials and I got his emails, and he was going to be at a place close to me to travel to. And I kept reading, come to this workshop to connect with spirit guides. And so and I kept throwing the emails away, putting them in whatever. And then it just kept coming up, kept coming up. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go because I want to see about spirit guides. So I sign up for this class and I get there, and it's a 2-day weekend course, but I didn't go on Saturday. And so I didn't know what all they talked about. And I met this gentleman. And so he's telling me that this workshop is all on how to fine tune your skills as a medium or a psychic. And I was like, oh, I need to leave. I don't belong in here. I'm scared to death. And so I ended up staying. It ended up being an incredible experience to have 100 people in an area where they meditate with James and open themselves up for messages. That was one of the most amazing experiences for me. Fast forward to lunchtime, I had a book of James. And so I went down and he was going to do some signings. So I went down and I saw him, and he signed my book and he looked at me and he goes, "Don't I know you?" And I said, "Yeah, I was a guest on the Beyond show back in 2000." And he got so excited. He's like, "I remember." And he was talking to his associate. He looks at me and he goes, "Did you write and publish your book yet?"
Wow.
And I went, I wrote it. I put it away. He goes, "No, you need to publish it." And he kind of gave me some pointers. And that just triggered, all right, I'm ready. I can do this. And so then I spent about, I don't know, 4 months editing my book because nobody needed to read the original book because
Mm,
that had everything in it. And so I wanted the book to be about my journey of healing and not about anything else. And so I spent that time editing the book. And then I hired a publisher and they went through an edit process. And I told the publisher, I said, whatever you do, don't put my book out on Valentine's Day. Please don't have that as my published date. And my kids said different. And so the published date on my book is Valentine's Day in 2017. So that's kind of the sequence of what happened to get me to the point of publishing it. And then I've just kind of since 2017, I focused on the kids' books for about a year. But I've shared my story with as many places as I could, because I'm working full time. And now I see retirement in the picture down the way a little bit. And this is just driving me right now, just to connect and share my story and try to help somebody else who's got grief and trauma and just feel like they can't move past that.
yeah. You know what? I just love the way you have like you partnered with your kids. Like that just is what it
Mhm.
feels like. It just feels like your kids are just here, just like guiding you forward, like let's go, mom. And it just feels like such a beautiful group effort. The book, everything. You just have to know that your kids are involved in all of these synchronicities and all these beautiful experiences that you've had. And I also love the message of repeated messages. Like you kept seeing the email,
Yeah,
and when that happens to me, I get introduced to something and then it comes up and it comes up and I'm like, okay, okay, I get it. I get it.
I'll pay attention. I'll read this now.
Exactly, exactly. Wow.
Well, and
Wow.
I will say another really important thing connecting for me was goldfinches. So Todd and I were reading the book Seed of the Soul, and we went to a park. We're big outdoor people, love to camp and be outside and in nature. And we went to a park that had a creek running through it, and we laid on a blanket and we were reading out loud, and he was reading and I was looking at the water because I'm a big water person, and the sound of it, it's so cleansing. And anyway, these three beautiful goldfinches flew down literally 3 feet from me, from the water, in the water, playing. And I just knew they were my kids. They just played in the water and were right there next to me, and they were there for the longest time. Todd quit reading, and we both just laid there watching these three goldfinches. And so anytime I see goldfinches, I see three. I see two male and a female. And when we moved back to Indiana, I put up goldfinch feeders, and I have like 3 generations of goldfinches on my property, and they're beautiful. And I talk to them, and I know they're my kids visiting at times, and they just chirp, and it's beautiful. And I sit out on my deck and just talk to them.
Wow. Wow, that's just beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, it's wonderful when we can make those connections and see that. And it's so, for I'm just going to speak from my own experience. It took me a long time to accept signs like that,
Mm.
to allow my brain to go there to say, oh, this is the kids, or this is spirit, or this is, the guides. And once I finally allowed myself, and I'm just saying this out loud in case there's others listening, kind of having the same thought process that I had for so long. Once I just allowed myself to just go there and accept what was happening, and relax into that, it's just been the most remarkable experience. It's been beautiful.
I think I opened quicker because I lost my only brother, my only sibling, when my son Sean was 6 weeks old and I was in the military. My only brother died, and I that's first. Well, that's one of the big grief times for me, to have to process all that. I had lost an uncle when I was young, so I've had to learn the stages of grief fairly early. But I know my brother looked out for me the whole time I was in the military. I always knew he was watching me because I was young and made a lot of careless mistakes and took a lot of risks I shouldn't have done. But every time I would say, I know, Brian, you're watching me. Thank you so much, because I'm being quite ridiculous right now and young. So, thank you. So I was kind of open to that. So then I think I looked for signs from my kids. And
Mm,
at first I couldn't find any. My husband, Todd, would get them. He would feel the kids and, other people. And I would get frustrated because I couldn't. And
yeah,
so then the goldfinches were a big thing for me.
yeah. That was kind of the doorway, the
It
opening of
was.
the realization. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
beautiful. Love that so much. What's happened since you published the book? What's changed? What's been your experience since you published the book in 2017?
Experiences on a publishing level.
Just like, how has this kind of changed things for you? Like writing that book, publishing that. I imagine you're sharing your story more. Has there been new realizations along the way?
Yeah. So my daughter helps me with all my social media, because that's not my forte. That's not what I like to do. I'm okay with liking stuff, but so when I feel inspired, I'll write a blog. She puts it up on my website, and I've had a lot of really great response from people reaching out through my website, and sending me, oh, this one woman sent me this beautiful letter with a picture of her daughter, Macy. And we called her Princess Macy. And she just shared how much she loved my kids' books. And it just melted my heart because she's reading those books out loud and the names of my kids, which is just an incredible thing for me. So, you know, they stay um, alive in my heart that way.
Yeah.
Um, so I've had a lot of really great response, through that and through social media and connections there. Um, and then again, the right place, right time. I follow Richard Paul Evans, the author. Love all his books. I've met him a couple times at book signings, and then went to two of his retreats at his ranch out in Utah, which were just life changing. They just are life reset, make you rethink the priorities in your life and not get so inundated with the day-to-day go to work and upkeep on the house, but you also have to do the upkeep on yourself and how to open up, I don't know, to be more open for growth in all areas, whether that's healing growth or growth on my spiritual journey. But that then snowballed into meeting Vinny, and I'm just enjoying meeting all these people and opening myself even more to like-minded people and building that community, to share with each other, just our interactions and what different things have happened to us, and that's a beautiful journey I'm on right now.
Yeah, I love that. Well, before, one of the questions I like to ask all my guests is what are some of the practices, spiritual practices that you enjoy that help you stay connected?
So I'm working on my meditation. As Vinny told me, I need to just quiet my mind a little bit and focus baby steps at a time, to open myself up. But I am trying to get into a ritual of a gratitude journal. And so just every morning and every evening, writing something that I'm grateful for the day. And it's amazing how it will start your day and finish your day, just having that journal. I also, as I read different books or different podcasts that I watch, I actually have a book called My Tools. And inside anything that's inspirational, I put it in there so I can read through it and remind myself, of just more uplifting things. I I enjoy just stretching in the morning, which is part of my meditation, and just sit in the quiet or turn on I have a app that has chakra clearing. And so I'll work through those if I'm having, need a reset on myself, as we all do at times. So those are just some of the spiritual things I'm doing for myself to kind of stay more open, to receive more messages. Um, yeah.
Great, great. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I think it's just so fascinating everyone's different, approaches to staying connected, and it all works. It's our attention and our intention, and it's wonderful. So before we go, let us know where we can connect with you, and also any other last minute things that you want to share before we go.
So I think just some big takeaways. If you want to look at my story, the big takeaways are: you're stronger than you think. Forgiveness is the gift you give yourself, and just open yourself to receive messages. And if you think, "Oh, I made that up," well, probably not. It's probably a message for you to actually hear. But you can connect with me. All the books are on Amazon, but my website is Theresa James, and it's THERESA. There's an H, Theresa James author.com. I'm on Facebook and Instagram as Theresa James Author, and please connect, please share, please follow, and you can reach me through any of those avenues.
Yeah. And on the front page of your website is a goldfinch.
There
And
is,
and
there
so
is.
when you go to the website and you see that beautiful goldfinch, now you know the story.
And it's actually the creek and the three goldfinches are on the front of my book.
Oh,
Yeah.
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 That's so interesting because I, okay, when I saw the cover, I didn't even connect to the goldfinches
Uh-huh.
initially. So I'm so glad you said that. I'm
Yeah.
so glad. That's so
So that's why I picked the cover. It
cool.
just represents my kids, my healing, my journey. Yeah. And so that's why I picked that for my cover.
Wonderful. Yeah,
Yeah.
like I said, I highly recommend the book. I love that um you really introduced us to your kids and who they are, they who they were here, who they are. Um and I don't think we mentioned it before, but your daughter was 3 and Jared was 6
Big.
and Sean
And
was
Sean was 12.
12. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
So 3, 6, and 12.
Yeah. She was 2 weeks shy of being 4.
Mm.
And each of those books that I wrote were life lessons I was teaching the kids. And so I'll just highlight the one just because I love it so much. It's Jared's, and it's I love and like you. And I taught them the difference. You always love, but you don't have to like behavior. And it's this whole story of he misbehaves and, I don't like you, mom. That's okay. I don't like you right now either, Jared. How about you go to your room and we'll circle back? But every night before bed, it was important to him. I love and like you, mom. It
Mm.
wasn't, I love you, mom. It was always, I love and like you, mom.
Love that. Love that so much. Thank you so much for
Thank you, Julie. This was
coming
awesome.
today. Yeah, I just appreciate you sharing your healing journey. I think it's such an important thing for people to hear, and I love the takeaways that you shared at the end too, because those are really important to highlight. So, thank you so
Thank
much.
you so much. Take care.